44 shit, you know what I mean? Busy man, busy man. Look, when that shit drop, you step all the way on their neck, step on their neck and they head with that shit.
Fine then, I ain't show no mercy, we gon' show them boy what time it is. I pop out like I'm Samuel, I got time to kill. Haters thought I died, I survived. They don't know how I did it, got it out the mud, straight to glory. They don't know how I feel, he nice but he don't show them skills, how I show them skills. He ride but he don't work the wheel, how I work the wheel. They mad, I'm too solid, circle tight, yeah, vacuum seal. No, they want my life, I ain't worried, I got rank for real. I got real soldiers, kill for me, nigga, watch yourself. They said you been in beast mode lately, you is not yourself. When you dropping that fire, precious marriage, they inquiring. They can't stop what's coming, but I see them conspiring. Cross the line, them firing. This bitch here, finna break the spin. No kindness, I don't trust you, circle small. You can keep your features. Me and my niggas don't keep no secrets. In the field like Jeepers Creepers, say they want some smoke, dawg. So I brought these chimney sweeps. Coming like we coming, you can't even.
Hello and welcome to the Ross Cloud Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ross Sr., and this platform was created to motivate and to inspire in hopes that you will become a better you. Well, I'll make sure you give a shout out to everybody that's listening all over the world. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Ross Cloud Podcast. Listen, we have a very, very special guest with us here on today. I'm elated, I'm excited, I'm humbled, and man, if y'all can hear it in my voice, I'm real excited about this one, okay? We have the one and only Mr. Commander General. How are you, brother?
Good to be here, man. Thanks so much, Ross.
Yes, man.
I'm doing great.
Yes, man. Thank you so much for coming in and, gracing us with your presence here on the show, man. We really do appreciate this. And
Appreciate you inviting me, bro.
Absolutely, man. Thank God for Brother I.S.U.P.K.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. He did the conversations, the phone calls, and he did a nice, gracious press on me. Which was really why I was willing to do it.
Gotcha.
Because of that. His demeanor didn't change.
Beautiful.
And we need to see more of us like that we don't let our emotions just control us,
True.
So thank you for your leadership and everything that you present, because you represented well, brother.
I appreciate that.
Right on.
Appreciate that rap too. Thank you, bro.
Right on. So listen, we're gonna go ahead and get into the conversation. And I usually like to take the folks on a journey, if you would, and we don't have to talk much. You don't have to divulge of anything that you don't want to talk about, Commander. And so I want to get into the fact of, where did your awakening, or where did you find God? What was that journey like to get you to where you are now?
It's a great story.
Right on.
I grew up in what was the Castle Hill Projects in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about it, they nicknamed it Castle Hill Never Ran, Never Will. It was I grew up during the 60s and 70s, and
right.
It was extremely violent, extremely dangerous and poverty-stricken area of the Bronx. And in that, I saw so many brothers and sisters lose their lives for nearly nothing.
Yeah.
For drugs and all of the little things that entrap us and destroy us.
Yeah.
And one day, a friend of mine invited me down to a small building in Harlem at 1 West 125th Street.
Yeah.
And he said, man, I'm telling you, these guys here can answer any question you ever want. And me, my young, arrogant self at the time said, oh, really? I got to go see this.
Yes, sir.
I went down to that little school with the little wooden chairs, and there was a guy sitting up on a podium. And I was about to introduce myself, and he said, stop.
Yeah.
He said, before you say anything, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I want you to think of the hardest question you ever had about God and the Bible. And I want you to lay it on me tonight. And he said, and I guarantee you, I'm going to answer every question you ever had.
Yeah.
And he double challenged me, and it was on. Wow. And I sat in that little chair, in that little room, and I questioned him about every single thought I ever had about God and the Bible. And I want you to lay it on me tonight. And he said, and I guarantee you, I'm going to answer every question you ever had. And he double challenged me, and they was on. And I sat in that little chair in that little room, and I questioned him about every single thought I ever had about God. And he answered every last one of them. And I went home that night and I realized I found the truth. I found the truth in a little place. And I said, from then on, I'm going to dedicate my life to it. Because I knew what was happening in the projects was only leading to death.
Yes, sir.
But so when I found the truth, I knew this could be the way to lead to life. So it switched me. I finally found a way to not see everybody go down into the drain. And it became my life's work from that day on. I kept coming back to Harlem on that 6 train day and night. And have gone on all over the world since then.
Sure thing.
And we've built an amazing, amazing organization because of it, through the grace and mercy of our Father in heaven.
That's right. Who were some of the mentors that helped you with that journey? I heard you speak a little bit, but who mentored you to this point? Someone that you looked up to as a leader, someone who influenced your life to continue this?
Sure.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, could I just give you a little history of the school itself?
Absolutely, I want you to.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
In the turn of the century, in the 1900s, short time after emancipation of slavery, white Jewish synagogues realized that there was an opportunity to create black synagogues. And so they went down to Harlem and created and built these black synagogues. And they started to teach black people the Jewish tradition, the Jewish way. And about that time, a man named Bivens came up from Florida, having learned from the Seminole Indians that we were Israelites. We were descendants of the original Jews. So he studied and knew this, and then came up to Harlem and saw these black synagogues. He then started to work with these synagogues to try to, get involved with them, but he found a conflict. The conflict he found was that they were following white Jewish traditions, and he was saying, but according to the scriptures, the Jews are black. So why are we following their way and acting like we are converts to Judaism, when in fact blacks that came over here in slavery are the descendants of Jews? And this, of course, led to discussions, and eventually he opened up his own school. He was murdered for teaching what he's teaching, which is why we're so persistent on these street corners.
Understood.
Because he, being, a sincere, noble brother, got murdered by Muslims for teaching that we were not Arabs, but that in fact we were the descendants of the Hebrew slaves that were in Egypt and here again. So he went on with that teaching. That led up to around 1963, 64. After that, the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge was established in 1969 by 3 amazing brothers who were students of Bivens. One by the name of Masha, another by the name of Ariyah, and another by the name of Yaquah. We consider them 3 serious brothers who carried this truth, and all adopted Hebrew names and surnames as Israel. They then mentored me, and for 20 some odd years I was one of their students who learned all the ways of the Israelite School of UPK, spread the gospel, taught, followed them anywhere they went. And then circa 2000, I became head, I think 2001, I became the head of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. And I've been the head ever since. And I've carried it on. So those were my main mentors. There were others as well.
Sure.
But those were the main 3 that carried this gospel up until now.
I love it, man. I love you. Thank you for that that history moment too. Thank you for that, man. Because again, I knew nothing about this. I would see it, but I don't think I ever had questions. And I didn't even think of any questions at the time when I first used to be approached by the brothers or them ministering on the streets. I didn't really, I guess, at some point in your life you do say, hey, I've heard somebody say this before, and maybe you just was like,
Yeah.
You know, you just go about your day.
Sure.
And it's easy to do.
Yeah.
And so a couple of questions that I want to ask you is, there are 3 things that I would like for you to talk about, and that's the 12 tribes of Israel,
Okay.
the shofar,
Okay.
and the menorah.
Okay.
Could you tell us, we can start with the 12 tribes
Okay.
of Israel, because I like for this to be a teaching moment too.
I understand.
Yeah. So if you could talk to us about the 12 tribes of Israel, the shofar, and the menorah. However you want to
Sure.
build on that.
Yeah.
Have your way, brother.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, the first thing is the Israelite School of UPK. We are strictly conservative about the Bible. We take the Bible seriously. We take everything literal unless clarified that it's metaphorical.
Yes, sir.
So we follow every law, statute, and commandment.
Yeah.
Now, during the time of Christ, he commissioned his disciples to bring back together the 12 tribes of Israel, which meant for you to do that, you had to go into the history. You had to figure out who they are, where they are, and where they were at.
Yes,
and
sir.
as you go into the history, at one point in our history, our kingdom split into 2. Our kingdom broke apart into 2. And then one half of that kingdom was eventually destroyed by the Assyrian Empire. When you go back into the history, King James Bible 1611, in the Apocrypha, it gives a clear description of where those Israelites went after they were brought into captivity in the Assyrian Empire. They got on boats and ships and traveled all the way over to the Americas. They are what we know today as the indigenous people of this land. When you go back into other records, like the accounts of Montezinus, and even some of the accounts of Christopher Columbus, when they arrived, those explorers arrived much later on. They found that the people that were living in these islands and in Central and South America were speaking Hebrew. And they would even greet them in Hebrew. And they would explain to them where they were at. They got clear maps of that. Roman Catholic Church, Spain has plenty of them. And they mapped out where these tribes were. So one half of the nation was over here in the Americas living as indigenous people. A lot of proof is involved. If you ever look at a traditional North American Indian garment, one, they're filled with fringes. Something that was unique to the Israelite culture. When you go back and read Leviticus, we wore fringes. Borders of blue, which was one of our laws, is a common theme on North American Indian garments.
Yes, sir.
The shield of David, or what they call the star, but it's a shield of David, commonly known on North American Indian tradition. And then coupled with the language and coupled with the explorers, we find that these are half of the kingdom of Israel.
Right.
Now the other half, in 70 AD, Titus, anybody that looks up a little history can look this up. In 70 AD, Titus, who at the time was a general, he became an emperor later, but at the time he was a general. And he marched on Jerusalem in 70 AD, destroyed it. That was the other half of our kingdom. Those people that were in that land were enslaved and pushed into Africa. Later on, some 1,500 years later on, when the transatlantic slave trade came together, both with the Arabs, Europe, and the Americas, that part of Christ's kingdom, or the children of Israel, were then carried away captive into the Americas. Those are who we know today as your so-called Negroes, West Indians, and Haitians. And by going through the records, we decipher which tribe is which. Okay? The head of that kingdom, that other half of the kingdom, was the tribe of Judah. The main bulk of the slaves that were brought over in the transatlantic slave trade were brought to the Americas. So blacks in America are direct biblical, ethnical descendants of the tribe of Judah. And so on with the West Indians in the Caribbean, the Haitians, and so forth. So that's the 2 halves of the entire kingdom, and that's where we get the 12 tribes from. And the sad part is this: These records are very common, but never taught in our religious institutions. Nobody wants to reveal who the 12 tribes are, and most of all, white Jews. They do not want that discussed because, of course, it could invalidate their.
I see where you're going.
You know
with
what I'm
that.
saying?
Yes, yes.
There's a book out by Arthur Koestler called The 13th Tribe, and it's almost a play on words because he titled it to say, for whites to be Jews ethnically, there would have had to have been a 13th tribe, knowing that there were only 12.
Yeah.
So in other words, he's basically saying without saying that there's no way that they are ethnically Jews.
Yeah.
And when you check their history out, of course, real quick, in 600 AD, the Khazarian Empire, which sat up in Europe between the Byzantine Empire and the Ottoman Empire, who were both fighting on both sides for control of Eastern Europe.
Yes.
You had the Khazar Empire in between, 600 AD, much around the time Muhammad was pushing north into Turkey and those areas.
Understood.
And so at that time, they had to keep their people together. And so what they did was they adopted the Jewish culture as a way to fight against the Byzantine Christianity and the Muslim Islamic way of life.
Gotcha.
They set themselves up as Jews, built an empire, came down out of Europe, and that's where we got white Jewry today, or Jewish people today. And so that's where those 12 tribes come from.
Okay.
And now we finally, after so many years, through the grace of Christ, have the truth on who they are.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. Before we go back to the shofar and the menorah, you know, when I was thinking, as you were talking, man, it was like I could actually visualize the slave trade and how all of that went down. When you look at it on the map, it's self-explanatory. I mean, really, man. When you look at brother, when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, you got Puerto Rico, you got the islands, you got South America. When you come on around, and then you start connecting the dots. you really start connecting the dots
and seeing who is who.
Yeah.
And right now in the Library of Congress, they have clear maps
man.
showing that the slaves they were taking were coming from different parts of Africa who were renamed after the 12 tribes.
Right on.
So why would Jews be naming cities in Africa?
Yeah.
It was because those Jews had come down into Africa hundreds of years before and came and were carried over here to the slave trade. And there are no Caucasians in the Middle East anyway. So if you just start with common sense, then something is not mixing here.
You know, me and my brother was having this conversation one day. We was riding, just chilling, and he was bringing up this subject that we're talking about now. We was just building, just talking, having good conversation. And one of the things he said to me was, he was like, I wouldn't be surprised if our own people sold us into slavery. Africans.
Well,
and I don't know, and when I say that, I just wonder if, that was a part of it too.
No, it wasn't.
What I'm saying is the entrapment. When I say that, I mean, like, I don't know, brother, but
here's the thing.
We here to talk about it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
sure.
Because I've always wondered that. Were we set up? Was it a setup? It's a lot of questions, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Sure.
Because when you sit down and you have these conversations, if you don't know, you don't know.
Sure.
And you just having a real dialogue with a brother saying, well, I wonder if somebody, were we enslaved? And why we are the Jews.
Right.
The chosen one.
Right.
This is, I hope I'm conveying this properly, because I know you're trying to.
Yeah.
I hope I'm conveying it to you right.
Yeah. Oh, this is a very common question.
Yeah, because I've always wondered that. You know what I'm saying? Especially when we look at how slavery was here in America. We think about how that whole thing is. It's the worst thing ever, man. So when I think about it, and the institutions that were built off of that.
The whole empire.
The whole,
Yeah.
It was about the money.
Sure was. A
was
well-organized industry.
Well-organized. So that's why I asked that, not to be critical or bring judgment, but a real question to say, did some of our own people enslave, sell us for slavery for goods?
Right.
I don't know if I'm saying that right.
No, you are. You totally conveying it clear. Like I said, it's a very common question, and listen, and it's a sincere question.
Yeah.
And I've been getting that question for 40 years.
Yeah.
And the truth of the
when
matter,
you think about the port of Ghana, I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
that's
when
fine.
I think about that, and then somebody had to entrap somebody.
Oh, it was definitely
I mean, it
organized.
wasn't just. It was a conglomerate of people when you think about it that made that happen.
Sure.
So. And go ahead, brother. I'll be quiet.
No sweat. No sweat. That's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
And you know what? In history, a lot of the answers to history are known in common everyday life. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Right now, and I'll start here and I'll walk us all the way back.
Yeah, please.
Right now in America, we have a so-called immigration problem. On our southern border. We've got all these people which is not an immigration problem, it's an immigration blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
We just don't see it because of the cruelty of this society.
Sure.
But all societies in all points in history have always utilized racism as a tool for power. What's going on the southern border is really an act of white supremacy. Okay, we saw that when the Ukrainians came in through the Mexican border. They created a separate line and ran them right on in, and it wasn't a problem.
Right.
But the Mexicans, who fighting for years and years and years, are still kept out. Yeah. Racism has always been used as a tool to keep one group away from another, keep one group oppressed from another.
Yeah.
People eat well when there are people in poverty to exploit and abuse. So now let's fall back to Africa and countries like Ghana and so forth.
Yeah.
When you go back to those countries, even today, many of those countries have 10, 12, 14, 15 different ethnic groups in the country. And they all have different languages, all have different cultures, and they will make it look to us in America like Africa is unified. When if you go to Africa like I did, you will see that they are completely ununified.
Gotcha.
That they are fighting damn near neighborhood to neighborhood.
Right.
And so when you go into the history of these countries, Ghana and so forth, right now the racism against American blacks in Ghana is reaching an all-time high. They want our money. They want Hollywood. They want, if you go over there and you from Hollywood, they're going to tell you're a descendant of King GEN.YAHANNA or somebody. You understand? But if you come over there, you understand, and you ain't spending no money like Meek Mills, you're going to get robbed and they're going to take your wallet and you might have daggone building.
Great point.
You understand? So we go back now to history. Let's wind it all the way back. Here, we know for a fact, through Roman records, that Titus marched on Jerusalem. We know for a fact that the Jews entered into Egypt, escaping that slaughter, and then eventually traveled further and further south as they were humiliated by the countries who were over them. As they moved all the way down to the west and southern parts of Africa, they were still experiencing racism just like you would in any country that you come to. Just because we're the same color, skin color, doesn't mean you're going to be readily accepted.
Right.
Many of the Rastafarians found that out when they tried to go back and live in Ethiopia. They, the whole movement moved a ton of people back, and they almost wiped them out. And when they wiped them out, they sent them right back to the Caribbean broke after they had done it. So nations have always done this. So this was no different with us. Here we traveled into Africa. We're strangers, different culture, different language. They didn't just intermingle with us. Oh, we black, we all black, intermingle. What they did was they plotted on us. And then when explorers came over from Europe and the Americas, here was an opportunity, a great opportunity, to not only cleanse their country, but to make a ton of money as well. So what we experienced was Africans running into our villages, the Hebrews' villages, capturing Hebrews and bringing them out to the border into these trade. One reason these slave markets were on the coast was because the white explorers didn't come into the interiors of the country. It was too dangerous. So they relied on the host country to go and bring them the slaves.
Absolutely.
So almost never gets said is that they weren't selling their own people, and they couldn't sell their own people. They needed their own people to strengthen their own country. Because they got 2 other countries over here strengthening themselves. So they wasn't going to sell their mighty men over to the Americas. So who was available? Here we go. We did it here in America. For years, Mexicans had temporary passes to come over the border, work for absolutely peanuts, and then go back. It was a way to keep them controlled and still make money off them. And it's done all over the world. You can check the history on every single country. The minute a country has the opportunity to put another country under them or another group of people under them, and us being a destroyed people, they sold us out of their country. They didn't sell their own people. They weren't that. They weren't. First of all, they weren't savages and they weren't naive, and they had an opportunity here. You know what I mean? So here it goes. And so they sold us on those ships. We came over here speaking Hebrew. We came over here wearing Hebrew garments. All of this is in the Library of Congress that rarely gets brought out and shown. That we were not Africans, but that the Africans were selling us. And they made money. The Arabs made money. Certainly the Europeans made money. And to be completely transparent, yes, there were a few blacks, not from Africa, but from Europe, who had prominent power and who got into the financial systems of those European countries and benefited off of the slave trade. There was a few that got in who were favorites and made money, just like today. You got wealthy blacks who, for a price, you know what I'm saying, will do whatever. Adds to their coffers. And so that's what it was. It's no real big mystery. They just got rid of the people that were in their country because they had an opportunity.
Man, thank you.
No sweat.
Thank you for conveying that and articulating that too, brother. Well.
Shalom, Israel. And when I mean Israel, I'm talking about the black, Hispanic, and Native Indians. The Lord's 54th annual Passover is going down again this year, sundown, April 1st at 500 South Salisbury Street in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Downtown Conventional Center. It's got enough room for all of us. The Lord's 54th annual Passover. Last year, brothers and sisters showed up from all over the world, rocking ancient garments and glorious apparel in order to serve the Most High in Christ. Now, it's that time again. Commander General Yohanna is putting out the decree for all brothers and sisters to show up sundown, April 1st in Raleigh, North Carolina. Join us at the Sheridan in Raleigh, the hotel right downtown. It's at 421 South Salisbury. The Passover is right up the block at the Convention Center, literally within walking distance. Make sure you pull up. Make sure that you do your due diligence because rooms are going fast and they are limited this weekend. You understand? We have months in advance of preparation. Do not wait till the last minute to get your room. The Lord's 54th annual Passover, Saturday, April 1st in Raleigh, North Carolina. Join us there.
It's about time.